I want to thank everyone for coming once again as we continue our fourth week of footage from Ukraine and these wonderful photojournalists who were there and risking their lives to keep us informed of what's going on. We encourage everyone to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and there you can see all of these recordings. So we think it's very important, and we think historically people are going to come here and look and see what war crimes look like that Putin has perpetrated on the Ukrainian people. We thank our sponsors, which is Epson, Photo Shelter, Archive, Pro Photo Daily, and American Photo. And without further ado, I give you Alex Lourie. Alex, it's all yours.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us. And yeah, I've been back for a month or so now. I think last time we spoke, I was just on the way out of Ukraine. So it's been nice to sort of decompress. That is part of the job. But yeah, I plan on heading back. There's talk of an offensive or counteroffensive to retake Kherson, a city in the south. So depending on when that happens or what access is looking like, I'll head back. But for now, it's nice to spend some time with my girlfriend and my cat. And
yeah, Alex, how do you decompress? Like, do you have a process of decompressing? I mean, like, what do you do?
There's a lot of painting involved, like nothing really related to Ukraine or anything, but just like very fine motoric activity. Like it kind of shunts all the anxiety out, and yeah, I find it very meditative and very liberating. And then also just like enjoying things like having a house and a cat and like loved ones that aren't going to be that aren't going to be blown apart tomorrow. It's really nice to be honest. It makes you realize.
And do you do that as like almost as a procedure, like, you know, this is what I'm going to do when I get back, or does it just evolve into that for you?
I guess both. Like, I mean, I know what I like doing, and, you know, I'm really excited to exercise every day and not eat gas station hot dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just stuff that I know I like and really have a renewed appreciation for.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Off you go, Alex.
So do you want me to start showing photos?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, let me share my screen here. And I'll just go over them chronologically like last time. Desktop. There we go. Share. All systems green there?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, I apologize if I'm repeating myself here. I've told this story a lot of times. But basically when this invasion started, and I want to say this invasion because you know, the war started and the overall invasion started back in 2014. But this phase of the invasion started February 24th, and I had been there about a month ahead of time, 3 weeks and change. And so my friend and I, Wolfgang, who's another really phenomenal photographer, you should check him out. Wolfgang, like Mozart, Schwann, Schwann. We were out in Bakhmut, which is a town in Donbass where he was renting an apartment. And Bakhmut is now basically, you know, getting wiped off the map. It's a frontline town now. And it was driving distance from a lot of frontline towns for 8 years, where the line of contact was, you know, with all that like World War I style trench warfare and everything. And we were there basically doing daily life photos in the trenches, because those soldiers had been there, or their units had been there for, you know, since 2014. And we're kind of on the daily grind. And on the night of February 23rd, like, we were at a restaurant, we were having steaks and getting drinks. And then 5 a.m., I think it was between 4 and 5 a.m. in the morning of February 24th, the special military operation, or whatever they call it, was declared. And, you know, we were like shit, like we got to get out of here. Like our thinking at the time was that the Russians were going to be much more competent and make a lot more progress than they initially did. Basically, you know, they had 8 years to know where all these Ukrainian positions were and get everything in place that they needed to wipe them out and make a really quick push, both on the northern border near Kiev and this line of contact out in Donbass. Now, thank God, we know that they weren't as successful as pretty much everyone in the world was expecting they were, or for them to be. So we packed our stuff up and we ripped out of there probably before 6 a.m. And the way the highway goes is it goes up to Kharkiv and then to Kiev. And we were trying to get to Kiev as fast as possible for 2 reasons. One was because that was going to be where the story was, and 2, because if the Russians were as successful as many people feared they were going to be, the concern was that the country was going to be overrun in less than a week, and we would have to be as west as possible to make our escape to Poland in that eventuality. So anyway, we wake up and we get on the road before 6. And so we're driving up to Kharkiv, and Kharkiv takes you past Kramatorsk, which has been hit very heavily. And there's a rail line that goes from Kiev out east to Donbass. And Kharkiv is the second to last, Kramatorsk is the second to last stop on there. And there's an air base there. So that got hit, and you're seeing explosions and cruise missiles and all that driving up, and the sky was literally falling. So we're pretty stressed out, and around sunrise, you see this huge column of smoke that we're driving towards, and it's so gigantic, like it doesn't really even change size as you're driving towards it. And we get into the suburbs of Kharkiv in this town called Chuhuiv, and I'm going to mangle all the Ukrainian pronunciations of every name because I'm not Ukrainian, but it's called Chuhuiv as far as I can say it. And it's really the first carnage we see as far as like gore, because these munitions that the Russians were using are really loud and deafen dogs. So the dogs a lot of times will panic and run into the streets, and then the people are panicking, trying to escape. And so there's you see just tons of roadkill everywhere. And we take a left into this apartment complex that has a crater probably the size of maybe as wide as an Olympic swimming pool, and it must have hit a water main because it had filled up with water by then. And so we get in there. There's blood. There's dead dogs. There's this huge crater, and lots of people screaming. And this is before first responders had showed up. And this right now, this woman you see is the first person who I saw face to face. Her name was Helena, 53-year-old teacher. And she had a whole saga after this. Some of these photos were the first to get out from Ukraine when the invasion happened, and were shared pretty widely. And of course, the Russian bots, or the people, whoever they are on the internet, were very quick to call her an actor or say that I don't even know how many messages. I'm sure there's a backlog of thousands on my phone of these are old photos, or she was actually a victim of Ukrainian bombing in 2018, or, she's an actor, she's wearing makeup, just all kinds of crazy stuff. So she got hit with all that after her whole life was taken away from her. But long story short, she is now in Poland. She's a teacher, she's an art teacher. So she's doing art classes with Ukrainian refugees over there now. And had eye surgery, and she's doing pretty well, last I heard.
So Alex, for the Russians, they had that whole system set up, ready to go. So no matter what images came out, oh, that's false, that's old, that's a fake.
Yeah, I mean, we see it today in the U.S., right? I mean, after every mass shooting, it's this is a false flag or whatever. I mean, it's not like there's some. I don't think there's this well-funded government office whose job it is to do that. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But no matter what happens in the world, there's going to be a million people on the internet who are going to immediately say like, this is fake, this is whatever. Yeah, we get that all the time in America, all the time. So yeah, that's basically how that shook out.
Okay.
This is that same apartment complex. I mean, I saw Helena, maybe 50 feet from where this photo was taken, and this poor old woman was on the bench, sort of rocking back and forth at a very agitated state, looking at the burning building. And this guy came and grabbed her and got her away from the fire. There's a lot of like gas and everything, and just because the missile has already hit and exploded, it doesn't mean that the danger is over. And I noticed this actually while I was doing these kind of talks, is how many photos I had of elderly women. So I wouldn't call 53 elderly, but they're all, ladies of a certain age, all these photos, and they're less likely to leave, and they're more likely to die, unfortunately, from these types of attacks. And I was going through my photos and realizing how many of the fatalities and wounded people were women. I don't want to say elderly, but older women. And this was one woman who was in an apartment complex when it was hit by Russian missiles south of Kiev. This maybe a week afterwards, and really reminded me of one of my very good friends, Carol Guzzi, is obsessed, and I'll use that word with 100% confidence. She is obsessed with Wizard of Oz. So Carol, I'm thinking, both, these women's age and also obsessed with Wizard of Oz. So this reminded me of those ruby slippers in Wizard of Oz. So it really reminded me of a close friend of mine. And she's also a photographer, obviously, for those of you who don't know her.
Yeah, one thing we've noticed, Alex, with different presentations, is that the elderly are the ones who always want to stay. They don't. Leave.
Yeah.
Right. They want to stay in their homes.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had a lot of photographers tell you that. I'll tell you that also. They say that pretty much across the board. Like, they'll everything from like, I don't have the money to do it, or what am I going to do? Like, get a new job in Berlin or wherever it is they wind up, to like, my great grandfather was here, my grandfather was here, my father was here, and I'll be here. Like, it is a whole range of explanations you get.
Yeah.
But not everyone. And you can see some elderly people here. This is Irpin. I think everybody's who's been paying attention to Ukraine is familiar with the photos of this bridge that came out this past winter. And for those of you who aren't, basically, when the Russians were trying to make a push down towards Kiev, this is kind of as far as they got. And this is a suburb. So if you were in Manhattan, you could say that this would be maybe Astoria or something like that, or the Bronx. And so everybody was fleeing from here. This is some of these people might be from Bucha or Borodyanka. Those towns are very close to one another. And of course, Bucha was where the photos came out of, all the people whose hands were tied behind their back and executed and all that horrible stuff. So yeah, the bridge was blown, and this is what it looked like pretty much all day, every day for weeks. Just people pouring out with whatever it is they could carry. A lot of pets, a lot of kids, a lot of babushkas, and a lot of people. Like, you'll see the woman right there who's at the front of the line talking to the soldiers, and the woman behind her. A lot of people will be wrapping white clothes, or and even the little girl in the pink jacket, wrapping white around them to show that they're civilians, which had varying degrees of success. I mean, you saw plenty of bloody, shot up cars that had white all over them, and children written on them. And I mean, it was pretty ruthless, pretty barbaric. This is a shot from under the bridge of just everyone queued up, waiting across.
In a very orderly manner, though, right?
Yeah, I've worked in a few countries. I did a lot in Iraq and Syria, some West Africa, Haiti, and obviously every place has a different culture. Every place has different ethnic groups, their own cultures, blah blah blah. But Ukrainians in general, I don't know if it's from decades in Soviet life being used to waiting in lines or whatever it is, but they're very orderly. Like they know how to queue. I will say that, and they know how not to panic. Very sort of stoic people. And as is an old, and a lot of these old, they had to empty out a hospital, which was doing I don't know what it's called, hospice care or geriatric care, whatever the elderly people in a hospital are called. I don't know. I'm not a medical person, but they had to empty it out, obviously. And so a lot of those people couldn't walk under their own power, especially over bombed out rubble. So the strapping young lads would have to carry them across in whatever they had. In this case, this woman's in a shopping cart, like in the middle of a Ukrainian blizzard too, which is carrying a woman in a shopping cart through a blizzard under circumstances where you weren't getting shot at and you weren't over having to do it over rubble would be challenging enough, but they had to do this all day every day. So these guys had their work cut out for them. And yeah, like I said, whether you were waving a white flag or had children written on your car or were clearly taking part in the civilian evacuation, that none of that, or for that matter, if you had a car that was clearly marked as press, none of that was in any way a guarantee that you wouldn't be targeted. And this is a car on that bridge. And if you look at the bridge, obviously you can't drive out of it. You can't escape via car. So that bridge was all parked cars, and then people would get out of their cars and flee by foot, like you're seeing here. And then, of course, the Russians would just shell the cars as they did that. So that's this. I mean, it's just probably some family's car that caught a bunch of shrapnel from artillery. I mean, it was really brutal. And it took me a couple of days to get to the point where I was like, there's no way this is a mistake, right? Because in the apartment complex, that town is near Kharkiv. There's an airfield near Kharkiv. That was probably inaccurate Soviet era munitions. Not that excuses the invasion or anything, but probably they didn't mean to blow up this apartment building. But this couldn't have been more obvious that they were, for whatever reason, targeting these civilians who were fleeing. And the reason I say that, one of the hallmark moments was this. So this is clearly the same bridge. And what the Russians would do, what these Ukrainian guys are shooting up in the air at, are little commercial drones. So the kind you could go on Amazon and buy right now for like $1,000, round about that. They would fly them over and use them as artillery spotters. And that's pretty common in conflicts, not just in Ukraine, but both sides will do it in Ukraine and in some African countries and Syria. And so these guys are trying to shoot that drone down so that it can't, get any intel. And as you can see, there's a guy in a maroon jacket. He's looking back at his family. There's another photo which I don't like as much, just from an artistic standpoint, but his family runs out after that, and it's like an older woman and a kid. And the Russians saw that, they saw that there's civilians fleeing across there, and they didn't care. They shelled it. I think there was better part of a dozen rounds, killed 8 people right after this photo was taken, including 2 kids. So I mean, at that point, it's totally proven, right? I mean, they can see that there's old ladies and kids and pets flying across there, and they shelled it deliberately. This would be taken probably within minutes of that at the same location. That's the stairs down from the bridge on the side that people were fleeing towards. This is one of the soldiers in the trenches out of Donbass. This was actually probably taken maybe a day or 2 before the invasion. So this guy, I mean, I hope he's okay. Some of those Ukrainian units out there, like, you constantly hear these stories of like 5 guys left in a company and stuff. I mean, on both the Russian and the Ukrainian side, it's artillery duels and the losses are just brutal.
Yeah, and Alex, do you get a sense of like not everyone likes to be underground, even from a protection standpoint, right? I mean, because that wouldn't be a place that I would want to be.
It's no one's preference, but like it's better than getting blown apart.
Yeah,
but like, well, and actually, I'll answer that question more thoroughly when we get to some other photos, because there are the people living underground photos are probably a better time to answer that.
Okay.
So this is in Bucha, and this is these funerals were just nonstop. The funerals and the burials were just nonstop, and I don't think you can see this guy's date of birth on that plaque. They'll usually put a plaque up on that cross, and the handkerchief or whatever you call that is blocking it out. But usually these guys are younger than me, 20s, early 20s. But then a lot of like elderly people, like you said, because they stayed behind. And this is such a heart-wrenching and like tragic moment, but it's repeated hundreds and hundreds of times. The amount of this suffering and sorrow is, I mean, there's no way to communicate it, not through photography, not through words, not through video, nothing. I mean, there's just no way to communicate it.
I find it a little bit interesting, like in this whole situation, there are flower arrangements. So like, like the florist is still operating, in the most beautiful traditional way that, it's almost like, this young person died in any other way, and it would almost be the same thing with these beautiful flower arrangements in the middle of war.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. That was one thing I noticed driving through Kiev, even before this part of the invasion started. Well, number one is some of those like plastic. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to know the supply chain. Are there all those, because this is obviously in the middle of winter, are all these flowers ready to go or whatever? I don't know. But the amount of florists in Ukraine is just mind-boggling. Florists, yeah. I mean, kviti is the word for flowers in Ukrainian. And probably every other block, you will see a sign for a florist. Like even driving through New York, Chicago, Philly, whatever, how many florists do you see? Not many, right? But in Kiev, they are just everywhere. That and notary publics. In Ukraine, notary publics and florists are just, it's like you would see trash cans or mailboxes or something. They're just, or bus stops. They're just everywhere. It's one of those things that like it's so normal to them. I'll ask about it, and people are just like, yeah, people need flowers. People need notaries. Like I've never gotten to the bottom of it, but it's definitely part of their society. I mean, flowers are not in short supply there.
Well, that must be one of the crops, obviously, that they grow that lends itself to be there, right? I would assume, between the wheat and farming, everything else that they grow, that's probably one of what they do.
Yeah. Obviously sunflower imagery is really big in Ukraine. They do grow a ton of sunflowers out there. But yeah, I've never really done a deep dive into that, but could be actually kind of interesting idea for a project. It's the florists of Ukraine and how they've been kicked into overdrive with this. But it is like, I mean, it is insane how many florists they have there. This is the Kharkiv administration building, the Oblast administration building. An oblast would be like a state or a province, and it was hit by a missile. Everything got blown out. And this is when the Ukrainians started re-inhabiting it with soldiers. This would be maybe a block away from it, where they hit a restaurant which is across from where some territorial defense guys were staying. Territorial defense I don't know if it's officially part of the army now or what it is, or the Ministry of Defense, but basically it's where all the young men and women who volunteered, but who weren't formally in the military, who volunteered to defend the country, they were called territorial defense. So they were staying in this building across the street from this restaurant. It was actually, or bar, an Ernest Hemingway themed bar called, what was it called? The Old Hem. And it got completely destroyed. And so these guys, these firefighters were trying to find bodies under the rubble, which they did. They found this one. This was really chilling. So we were in the, it was a basement bar, and they were digging, and there's just tons of rubble. And one of the guy's friends, this guy who you see here, he's dead, had his Apple Watch and did like the find my phone thing. You know how like Apple products, you can do the find my phone thing with his phone. And so everyone would get really quiet, and you could hear his phone like ping from the Apple Watch, and then they would dig near where it was pinging, and then everyone would get really quiet again, and then they would do find my phone again. So it was very eerie, and eventually they found his body. And these guys, man, like it was all day, every day for them. It still is, you know. Kharkiv is still getting hammered pretty hard, and yeah, just all day, every day.
And Alex, do you have plans on going back anytime soon? Where are you at? You know, in all of it?
Not concrete plans, but I'm sure I will. Probably sometime in autumn, I think. And it depends on what happens with the Kherson counteroffensive. So these are like we've said numerous times, elderly, older folks, and this is right after a missile hit their apartment building in Kiev. This would have been in the Obolon district of Kiev, and yeah, I just sift them through the rubble. I mean, you see this constantly. This elderly people picking up the pieces of their blown to shit residents. It's just becomes routine in a horrifying way.
I mean, those buildings can't be safe to go in, right? You're doing that on your own for these folks, right?
Huh?
These folks are doing it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, are they safe to go? I mean, no, nothing's safe. I mean, you don't know what kind of structural damage has happened, or even, I mean, this, like in the basement, you don't know what load-bearing things have been blown out, right? Yeah, it's no, I don't think anyone would recommend going in those places, but obviously firefighters do, journalists do, and the residents do. Like, but no, it's not safe. There's broken glass everywhere. There's probably open gas lines, and always the possibility of a double tap, like another strike, right? Because you gotta figure if the missile hits a residence, if it's just an apartment building, depending on what mood the Russians are in, it's either a terror attack to like whatever their motivation for terrorizing people is, or you got to figure they're trying to hit something, missed, and are going to shoot something again, right? So you never know. This would have been that same apartment complex the first day, and yeah, I mean, picture kind of speaks for itself. I mean, this is one of those times where, as a photographer, you want to shoot it, but you don't, right? Like, you don't want to intrude in this horrible day of this man's life, right? And like, I mean, if your loved one had, if you were in this position crying over your loved one, like, would you necessarily want, some foreign journalist guy with a expensive camera and all kinds of gear, like trying to get as close as he can and try and get the angle right and everything? Like, of course not. But on the other hand, you do got to show it. So it's one of those times where, not that any of this makes you feel great as a journalist, but it's one of those times where, at least for me, I don't feel great, but I just have to do it,
And Alex, is there a seasoning of you as a human being of how to take that kind of a shot just right? without an intrusion, without, still giving dignity to everyone involved, like enough to see that it's a human being without being too graphic, right? I mean, like, how long does that take you to get that right? In time?
I don't think there is.
Right.
I don't think there is such a thing as like getting that right. It's so subjective. I think that, I was waved away after this and I didn't come back, and I was waited not by this guy, but by another woman. And fine, this got it. Like, this is the kind of thing where, I'll kind of like be like gingerly take one, go and like, this guy doesn't have the time or the energy to be like chewing away press, right? So like, he's not necessarily going to tell you like, no, like, get out of here, even if that's how he feels. I don't know. It's so, I mean, I guess my answer would be it's so situational. You just kind of have to be like, to answer your question, like graphic, I don't really, that's not really my hang up, because graphic is graphic. I mean, that is what it is. Like, there's no way around that. But intruding on a like saying goodbye or like loss or something like that, that's a bit more where my trepidation comes from than like blood and gore and intestines or whatever. Like, that's something that everyone should have to see, if it was up to me. But this is just like, yeah, I mean, give the guy some space, but also like, this is what's going on. It's not, the war isn't bad because buildings get destroyed. It's bad because stuff like this happens. I mean, it is bad because buildings get destroyed, but like, that's
Right.
small ball compared to this. Yeah, I would answer that question by saying it's so subjective and everybody's different. Like, some people would be like, get the hell out of here, you disgusting vulture. And other people would be like, we'll like grab you by the wrist and like be like, document this, like the world has to see. So it depends on the photographer. It depends on the people who their photos are being taken. Like, it could be either extreme. It could be like, chased out of there, or it could be, get back here. Like, why are you being squeamish? You have to shoot this. So it's so subjective. There's no one size fits all answer.
Yeah.
Like, for this was like, you have to show this. And this poor kid, I think 17, was a traditional Ukrainian dancer, like, going around doing, and was going to go to university for that. And Russian shell got him. And the staff told me, this kid's really strong. We told him we could only save one leg. And he was like, all right, like, I'll find something else to do, take it. But, his life's obviously changed dramatically. But it's one of those things where he's like, yeah, shoot this. You know what I mean? And it could go entirely the other way. Like, some people be like, no, I'm naked, I'm in bed, I'm vulnerable. I don't want to be dealing with fucking American photographers coming in to like, build out their portfolio and whatever. Like, it could go either way, but this was like, absolutely, like, people have to see what the Russians are doing.
Yeah.
So this guy, like, this, and there's shades of gray, right? So this guy was like, take my photo, but don't use my name. So that was his caveat. And to explain this, the antiseptic, like iodine that we use in the US, but in the former Soviet Union, they have this really green, like turquoise coloring. So this guy was in his bedroom, explosion blows his window in. So like, all those gashes are from, glass shards. And he's just covered in these slices. So they had to douse him in this antiseptic, which has this really obviously striking color. And there's so many parts of this. It's just surreal. Like a man covered in turquoise. Like, it's just not things that you think of when you think of war, but it's all these like weird, dreamlike, nightmarish images that you're exposed to. Same hospital in Kharkiv. This is another thing, you know, every culture has different funeral protocol, right? Like in America, funerals are very private. Like if I asked you, like if you were like, yeah, my cousin or my brother, whatever, he was in Afghanistan, whatever, he's being laid to rest in Arlington. And if I was like, oh, can I come shoot that? Like that could be considered very intrusive. Every culture is different, right? Like in Kurdistan and Iraq, like funerals, especially for soldiers, there's always a media presence. Like they have to show that. Like it's a very big part of their culture, almost like a wedding. Like you want to show that you were there, right? Like it's a very, funerals are such a social thing, and the imagery associated with funerals is so big that like there has to be photographers and videographers at them. So I'm just trying to underline the point that there's no one size fits all. And, you know, this is obviously very specific circumstances, because you can see how many graves are being dug. This is Bucha. So all these people were murdered by the Russians in this town where they were just running wild. And this guy, his loved one, smoking a cigarette right before the coffin gets buried.
And all these are hand dug, huh? I mean, there's no machinery there at all, right?
Everything I saw, like I wouldn't conclusively say that there were no machines involved, but everything that I saw was hand dug. I'm not saying no machines could ever have dug one of these, but yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were all hand dug. This is that same town, Bucha. This is Easter, which is a huge holiday for Orthodox Christians. And this is in that church, the church where the giant mass grave was, where the Russians built a huge mass grave. And so this is the first Easter that after the town was liberated. Might have been, let's see, so Easter is March or April, excuse me. So yeah, it would have been like 3 weeks after the massacre. This is a Russian soldier who was in a helicopter who was shot down, and it was just absolutely incinerated. This is near Kiev. You can tell he's young. His teeth are really white and undamaged. The sign that he's probably like, I don't know, 20 something.
You know, it's interesting when you see, you know, this and other, you know, young people being killed. You know, it doesn't really matter that this particular body was a Russian, right? It's a Russian kid who's felled by war for, you know, God knows what reason, right? So there's still sympathy for that kid, you know.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's different.
Man or woman, right?
Yeah, probably man. Yeah, you know, everyone's different with that. You know, plenty of Ukrainians are like, yeah, good. Like if that guy survived, he would have been raping my grandma or whatever. Yeah. You know, it's everyone's different, you know, like, and that's something that I, as a photographer, especially a young photographer, I haven't really, you know, I try to basically just take a picture, and you can, you know, whether you're Ukrainian or you're Russian or you're American or you're from Zimbabwe or Korea or Peru or whatever it is, it's the photo, and you can decide how you feel about it. Yeah. Yeah. Like I wouldn't want to gloat over this, and I wouldn't want to make it a sob story necessarily either. It's, you know, it is what it is, and digest it how you want.
Yeah.
So actually, I think the second time I went to Ukraine, I think it was the first day that since the beginning of that invasion that more people crossed the border from Poland into Ukraine than Ukraine into Poland. And that would have been because the Russian offensive towards Kiev had failed and they retreated. And basically everyone who was living near Kiev, which is a big city with big suburbs, was like, okay, looks like I can probably come back. Not everybody, but many people. Okay.
Yeah.
And certainly less people were feeling the immediate danger like they were in February, in the beginning of March. And on the road towards Kiev was a column of Russian tanks that had been destroyed. So for a lot of people who were coming back, one of the first things they saw before they got to Kiev was these destroyed invading tanks. So lots of people were coming out and climbing on them and writing on them and taking selfies and taking group photos. And it was kind of an interesting welcome back experience for some folks.
I mean, that really is a statement of where we are. You know, the world is today, right? I mean, you have people, you know, at the edge of the Grand Canyon and, you know, wherever people are. But I mean, I guess that's got to be incredibly patriotic 20 years from now. This young girl, you know, talking about her dad or her grandfather was involved in this war. I mean, like, and the mom there taking that photograph. I mean, you could do, you know, a 10-page essay on these types of photographs, right?
Sure, yeah.
You know,
I mean, that tank was there to kill you, right? I mean, it was as if we don't really have a thing in America because we haven't been invaded since like 1812 or whatever. But like, you know, it's all those guys in that tank were there to kill you and rape you and steal your stuff. And so the fact that they were stopped and you get to come home is something that I think a lot of people seem to, you know, obviously it's death and it's brutal and it's, you know, for a lot of people who don't have any connection to the conflict, it's like, why would they be so happy about death and fire and blah blah blah? But you know, I think that kind of interpretation really misses the point.
You slayed the dragon, right? I mean, that's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. It's like Bin Laden dying or whatever.
Yeah.
So this woman, I'm still in touch with her and now that I bring this up, a few of these photos, because Ukrainians are very connected on social media, and a lot of these, because it was shared so widely, imagery from Ukraine was shared so widely, excuse me, on Instagram, on Twitter, and everything. A lot of people found their photos that were taken by photojournalists. And this woman had found mine, and I still dig through my archive of messages just to see if there's anyone who's messaged me as, hey, that's me, or that's my husband or whatever. And so this woman messaged me and it's like, that's me after my apartment was destroyed, and she's a refugee now in Poland, and you know, very very grateful for it. And her Instagram was really interesting because it's like any other 30-something-year-old woman. It's like her with her friends, her at a birthday party, her in a bikini on vacation at the beach, and then it's this photo. You know, it's a lot has been made about Western reaction to this war and how much of that is based off of the relative familiarity of Ukrainians versus, let's say, Congolese or Yemenis or something like that. And that's a large conversation and with a lot of points to make. But one thing I will say is for good or ill, if you sent an American to Ukraine or a Brit to Ukraine before February 24th, it would be a pretty easy landing. It's not a whole lot different. It's not like going to, you know, the interior of the Amazon rainforest or anything. And whether that's good or bad or whatever is a long conversation, but it's certainly like her Instagram is no different than a lot of other women in New York or whatever. Just as a data point is something to remember.
Right? She's just a mom.
Yeah. She's a mom. That's her son. I thought it was her little brother. It's her son. And I think that's it for this photo reel.
Well, great. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat room, or you can just raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of nice
people can now unmute themselves.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself. Yeah, a lot of a lot of really nice comments. So Alex, what are your plans? When do you think you go back? You know, are you ready to go back? Do you go back based on what you hear in the news that there's another offensive? Like, what are the sort of the checklist for you to go back?
Oh man. Well, right now, I think I mentioned on the first time I was on there that my need to win back a love interest kind of coincided with the beginning of the invasion, which was not convenient. A lot of people lost a lot more, so I'm not complaining. And also, I did succeed in that. She was very.
We're going to do your wedding, right? That's exactly right. Now I remember, because I'm an officiant, I could do that wedding. That's right.
She was very patient and forgiving, and anyway, I'm really enjoying spending a lot of time with her and my cat, and just being home and experiences like this. Like I have a roof. And I know that when I wake up tomorrow, my water is going to be on, my gas is going to be on, no one's going to kill me. And, soldiers aren't going to come and steal my toilet and what, and that's like, not everyone can say that. That's a privilege. And I'm really enjoying it. But to answer your question, it depends. It depends on access. Obviously now the military has gotten a much better grip on the situation. In 2014, I've talked to a lot of Ukrainians, it's the same thing. Like it was such chaos initially, and as a journalist, you had a lot more freedom to do what you wanted. Now it's a military. It's under the control of the military, and the military is gonna. They need a really good reason to say yes to you. Because no one's going to get in trouble for telling you no. So that's one thing. And when the Russians gain territory, and they've gained like one town in the past few months, and when I say gain a town, I mean they destroy everything, and then they take over the rubble. But there's really nothing to shoot there, because there's nothing that the Russians aren't going to give you any access, right? I mean, they don't even have access to Russian photographers. It's just a complete non-starter. The only thing for us, for journalists, that I see is when the Ukrainians take territory, so much stuff comes to light, right? Like nobody knew about everyone getting their hands tied and executed in the head and thrown into mass graves in Bucha until the Ukrainians took that town back. So God only knows what's going on in Mariupol or Kherson or any of the occupied territories right now. I mean, there's no way to get that information out. So I'm sure in 20 years, we'll know now, like, oh my God, the Russians were doing this. Why didn't the world stop them? Why didn't America why did they prevent this Holocaust? But right now, all of that is under lock and key. All of that's behind an iron curtain. And the only way we're ever gonna find out about it is if some people on the Russian side talk, or if the Ukrainians take land back and find out what kind of atrocities have been happening.
And part of your thinking from a practical standpoint, all right, I want to go back. Do you contact another journalist that you'll go with, a handler?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I
mean, we're the network is, as I'm sure you know, very tight, and we're in communication with each other, like on group chats and everything, all day, every day. And it's, I don't want to say selfish, but doing this kind of job does incur costs for other people besides you, right? Like it incurs costs for your mom, who's like, oh my God, is such and so gonna die? Where is such and so? It incurs costs for your siblings, being like, oh, I'm gonna have to console mom if anything happens to Al. It's more than just, oh, can I afford the plane ticket, and can I afford the translator and the gasoline? And so while
that's a great point, Alex. We don't really think of that core.
Yeah. And those things are those costs are acceptable under
Yeah.
the right circumstances. You know, that's the decision we make, is that like, well, mom's going to be stressed out, but you know what,
I gotta go.
I gotta go. Yeah, exactly. But um you don't want to, it makes you feel a little grimy because you're talking about a situation that people are suffering in, and you're making the calculus, well, I can't take good pictures of that suffering, so I'm not gonna put my mom in America through the heartache or spend money or whatever. But that is the calculus that you have to make, and
Yeah.
you
I
just
never
have
thought of
to
that. Yeah.
have to remember that like you're really really fortunate for having that option. God forbid one day you won't for whatever reason. But you know, that's how it is. It's a situation.
Right. I mean,
And that's not something that reflects really well necessarily on photojournalists. But you have to make that call, just like a firefighter or an EMT or a
yeah.
soldier or a cop does. Like, if I go here, will I be able to do what my job is, and does that outweigh the risk and the danger?
Right. And I mean, and your lady downstairs, right? I mean, is she ready for you to go again?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And the stress that is in your intimate world,
yeah.
right?
She doesn't have a mother's worry yet.
Right.
I'm seeing a question here from Anya.
Right.
What intelligence do you rely on to decide where to go film and be in the action? That is such a I mean, that can vary from minute to minute. Like, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of how to answer that question, and I'm thinking of so many different things. Like when the invasion on February 24th, that was all over Twitter. But like there had already been like boy who cried wolf things, like, oh, Putin's invading now, oh, Putin's invading now, oh, Putin's invading now. But that was like that within like 10 minutes was like, oh, okay, this is the real thing. Like, we have to hit the road. But for smaller things, like you make friends. Like, I'm very good friends with so Kiev fire department has a photographer he's a firefighter, he's a photographer, and I know him, and he'll be like, hey, we're all going to this thing, the Russians blew up, this building. Or for larger decisions, it's just like staying on top of the news, like, will there be a Kherson offensive? Are things in Donbass just like, are you trading 6 inches east one day, 6 inches west the other day? Yeah, you just kind of have to stay on top of the news. And like by now, like, you have so many good friends who are journalists and who are Ukrainians who work with journalists that you just have to, kind of ping them.
So it's that media, that real organic media of people on the ground, like these firefighters, that is really truthful news that you go by more than what you would read in any paper or any media platform.
Yeah, and I mean, there are good Ukrainian journalists too, but like, yeah, there's lots of people involved in all this, whether it's people who work at hospitals, firefighters, military, whatever. Who, like, they're not there to generate media, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They're just doing whatever their job is, and a lot of times you can rely on them for a lot of times for security reasons. They're like, no, sorry, but yeah, you just have to cast a wide net and be tenacious.
Any other questions from anybody? Well, Alex, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming in and giving us, more and more of that peeling back of the onion, and really, letting us have a real sense of what it is on the ground there. That's something we all need to see, and I think it's invaluable to show us, even if we can't look all the time. We need to see it. I mean, as we sit in our apartments and our homes. Otherwise, how would we know, right? How would the rest of us know without guys like you and your colleagues?
I do want to say, just because I have you guys here, there are some great Ukrainian journalists, and I mostly know photojournalists. I don't really know any writers or anything, at least not as well. who are doing great work all day, every day. If you guys don't check him out already, Yevgeny Maloletka. I can't think of anyone doing better work than him right now. You know, he was in Mariupol for a long time. Also with Mstislav. They both work for AP. I would check out Mstislav. I think his last name is Chernov. But Mstislav and Yevgeny.
Yeah,
and also,
if you could email me a few names, that would
sure.
be great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Julia Kochetova also. Like there's some.
Yeah, she's been on. We've had her on actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's some Ukrainians who are there all day, every day, and like they don't get to like be like, well, I guess I want to go home and hang out with my cat and my girlfriend for a while. Like really, not that there's anything wrong with that. I do value it. But check out those people; they're awesome. And if you spend 1 hour looking at look on Instagram, I'm a photographer, so I'm on Instagram a lot, and just like looking at who's commenting on whoever's post or whatever, like like you can probably get 60% of the journalists who are working in Ukraine right now like followed. And yeah, so don't take my word for it. I left a couple months ago. These people are on the ground doing great work now, and obviously it's important to pay attention to Ukrainians too, not just us.
Yeah. No, we will. And you know, Al, also, if you know anyone who's documenting what's going on in Poland, because we've had a number of people on who have been praising the Polish people for what they did in receiving people and everything else. I'd love to see a piece on that. You know, that sort of intrigues me. You know, when we're in that page, and you don't have to come up with a name now, but if you think about it, that's something that would be sort of compelling to see that side, or any of these other nations that are taking in all these folks. I hate using that word refugee, taking in all these Ukrainians. That would be great. That's sort of an interesting thing for me. You know, what people do. It's sort of like, what's that play from 9/11? You know, when all the Canadians went to the airport.
The airplane, yeah, when the plane landed. What was it called?
It's a very simple name. In the Come Home With Us?
No, yeah, wait.
Come Away.
Come Away With Us. Come away, right? I mean, which is very, very compelling. You know, like with that type of thinking, I would love to see. You know, that may be an interesting thing for us to see. You know, the heroes on all these bordering countries. You know, just in the smallest ways. You know, with mankind. You know, you see the atrocities, and then there's angels. You know, on another border, helping other people.
No, I think that's really important. And, you know, a lot of the world sees photos taken predominantly by, you know, Americans, Brits, French. But if the last few years in the US have taught us anything, you know, stability is not a guarantee in any country. God forbid someday the shoe's on the other foot. And we're gonna want to tell our stories if things ever get really hairy. So definitely I would encourage everyone to make an effort to check out some good Ukrainian photojournalists and who are doing work that both inspires, makes me sad, and also makes me a little jealous because I'm a photographer.
There you go. Well, Alec,
I have a question.
Yes,
yeah.
Sandy, go.
How do you get your pictures seen? I mean, like Instagram, I didn't know you until just now. I started following you. But how do you get your images, which are so compelling and very hard to look at, I have to say, but incredibly great, so that Americans and the world see what's going on? I don't think people really know what's going on.
Well, that's a really big question, and if I had the answer how to get your photos to the widest audience possible, then I think Frank could be charging a lot more than free for this talk.
I almost want to see airplanes dropping leaflets so that people could see. I mean, I think they may have done that in World War II. I don't know.
my initial reaction is this. Number one is just the most boring professional answer is I give my photos to an agency, and then outlets will purchase them from that agency. Like, I mean, so that's the answer from a professional standpoint.
And when you said
which in
when you say outlets, Sandy, he means newspapers, magazines.
I know,
yeah,
I know.
yeah.
I understand
Okay,
that.
okay. Yeah.
So
These people, you know, like me. I didn't, other than watching these weeks that Frank has put on, I had no awareness, and I get the newspapers. I don't see this.
Well, it was around a lot in February and in March, but you know, the news changes like the weather. Now it's, you know, FBI raid, Mar-a-Lago. Before that, it was Roe v. Wade. You know, it's always going to change. The world is never going to stay on one topic, unless you make an effort to be like, okay, like I still get Syria and Iraq news because I have carved out, like, I know which sources that like I check every day and that aren't going to be like, they're not going to be front page on the Washington Post, because that's not what their consumer base wants to hear about every single day. So you have to find like if you want reproductive rights news or Ukraine news or whatever it is, there's going to be an outlet for this job. Yeah, or that just gets in front of your face every day. And number two is the other thing I wanted to say is, if I judged the worth of doing this job strictly on awareness raised or action taken, I would quit, because you're not going to take a photo that's going to end a war. You know, you can take a photo of that, you know, the napalm girl in Vietnam, and the war is still going to happen. You know, you can take whatever moving, horrible thing it is, and the bombs are going to fall. It's part of your life that's out of your control. You're not in the Kremlin. You're not in the White House. It's you can't control it. All you can do is your best, and you have to thrive in a way on the lifestyle. Like, and it's kind of a hunt, right? Like, it is like, okay, where do we have to be? What permissions do we have to get? You know, I'm not going to lie to you. There's an adrenaline aspect of it. And it's, you have to, one has to like,
I know what you mean.
be into the lifestyle in order to gain fulfillment from it. Obviously, you want as many people to see it as possible, and you want as many people to understand the situation as possible, that like, these aren't Nazis and the Russians aren't freeing them or whatever. I mean, I should always come across as neutral, but I mean, those are lies from what I've seen. But you want as many people as possible to like have the same understanding as you do, and the more you understand, the more complicated it is. There's no purity in conflict, ever. There's, you know, if you have 100% moral clarity on any issue, it just means you're not close enough. And you want to bring as many people into that as possible, but like, at the end of the day, you're not an evangelist. You know, it's not your job to save the world, you know?
Yeah.
I mean evangelist in not necessarily as a religious thing, but you know,
As Americans.
it's, you do your best, you know. Like, I judge my success on how I've progressed as a photographer and how people in the photos react, to be like, oh, thank you or whatever, more than like, I've, you know, raised awareness, which is great, but I can't afford to have that tied to my own sense of self-worth.
I understand that. I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, these are all very complex pieces with no clear roadmap to get to the end. I mean,
I'm more on Facebook than I am on Instagram, and I don't see this anywhere on Facebook.
But you know what, Sandy, that's what Alex said. You really need to make an effort to find the channels, the platforms that will give you this information.
Okay.
From people like Alex and
like,
Ron,
if,
even, you know.
Well, I just worked a fundraiser for Ukraine, raised money, and I just got an email from the person that organized the whole thing, and we're starting at 14,000. It can only go up because she hasn't gotten all the checks counted and the money that's being mailed into her. And I thought that was terrific, but it's a drop in the bucket. It's like
That's all right.
nothing.
But you know, a drop here and a drop there, it all adds
Oh,
up.
absolutely, absolutely. I would work it again and again and again because it's
Yeah,
going to
just
help somebody.
I would say you could curate that as much as, like, if you wanted your Facebook and your Instagram to be nothing but vegan recipes or whatever, like you could make that happen. If you want it to be nothing but news about Ukraine, you know, that's the algorithms are good. Just like a few things, share a few things, and pretty soon you'll get way more than you ever wanted about
Exactly.
Ukraine
That
or
I
whatever
was
it
just
is.
going to. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well,
Well,
again,
thank you,
Alex,
Alex. Your
yeah,
images are
I
incredible.
really do appreciate it. And you know, of course, you have a standing invitation. You know, with any of your projects or a book that you're doing, we'd love to have you come back and just show us more and inspire us more and educate us.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Which is certainly what you did. But I'll give you the last word, Alex. So you sign us off tonight.
No, yeah. I would just say thanks so much. Thanks, Frank, for putting all this together, and contacting me, and also Jay, right?
Yes.
Yep. And thanks everyone who attended. And yeah, it's there's about a week after every crisis where it's like exciting and it's panic mode and adrenaline, and you want to raise a ton of money and you want to raise a ton of awareness. And then after that, it becomes one of the sad, depressing, horrible facts of life. Like that's what this war is going to be, a grind. It's not going away. It's not going to be as like help #save Ukraine as it was in March. But that does not change the fact that the social media landscape has changed does not change the fact that the actual landscape is the same. So just because everyone isn't gassing each other up about, putting yellow and blue flags everywhere and everything like that doesn't mean that it's any less interesting or it's any less urgent, and doesn't mean you have to have your life consumed by a depressing subject matter, but it keep it on the radar and keep people in your hearts. And yeah, check out Ukrainian photographers and journalists and see what they want to bring to you.
Right. Perfect, Alex. Again, we thank you, and everyone will be back tomorrow night with who do we have? Heathcliff O'Malley tomorrow night.
Great guy.
Yeah, good.
I met him in Kiev, and we were walking around. This is before the invasion started, and he was just like, "You really think this place is going to be full of like bullet holes and air raid sirens in a couple of weeks?" And we were like, "No,"
Really?
but yeah, we were wrong.
It's amazing how small and tight that network is of all you men and women, covering these conflicts. It really is. You mention a name and everyone knows everybody else. It's really, there's a little bit of comfort for us that you know each other and you sort of watch out for each other, which is really, in some way as a dad, it's sort of comforting that somebody's watching out over these young men and women doing the hero's work of our time. So we thank you, Alex, and we'll see everybody